can't really just always trust it. So how are you validating it? What's your process on cleaning this, and what kind of visualizations are you using to make sure that you're accurate about this? So these are the kind of things they're going to know. If you can accurately talk about how you think about cleaning dirty data, how you validate that these results are correct, then that's going to instill a lot of trust in them. Being able to talk about dirty data, and this will show not only your accuracy, but your experience and your thought process, like I said before. Now to those questions, I have some factors here that I wanted people to consider. Oops. So as I'm sure you've heard of before, garbage in, garbage out. If you input something in that is completely dirty or that is just completely inaccurate, then you're going to get exactly what you put in there. That's what's going to come out. So that is why cleaning data is so important. Things that you need, I think you should consider when you are looking at a new data set, or when they're asking these kind of questions, is when are these fields implemented? Are they new fields, or have they been here for a long time? If they're a field that's been here for a long time, then perhaps maybe it's outdated. Maybe our thought process around collecting case reason type, for instance, could be different. Maybe we've combined currencies since then. So maybe we've acquired some new European customers. So now we're operating both the pound and the dollars. So these are kind of things that you need to kind of consider when you're looking at data sets. Know your data types. When you look through them, are your currencies, are they all matched up? Your dates, or do you have some dates that are way far in the past? Do you have some dates in the future? Does that make sense, right? So these are kind of things that you want to check as you do this, because these fields could be manually implemented by pretty much anybody. You don't really know the process unless you were the engineer who kind of architected the system. So these are kind of some questions I always recommend asking yourself as well as the data set when you use these kind of information. Are there any questions on this so far? Cool. And I'm happy to talk more about this later if anything else comes up or you think of anything. So next thing I want to talk about is the other kind of hard skill, kind of soft skill. It's the eye for design. Design is a very big part of being a data analyst, because the big part about being a data analyst is how quickly can you grab their attention and how quickly can you give them the important information as quickly as possible. Now on this slide, I don't know anything about the composition of the 38th Parliament of Canada, but I can tell you the first thing you looked at when I moved to the slide was that big red box at the bottom, the Liberal. And that's because things like color, boldness, and placement of information is going to be very important. You always want to make sure that you are using color correctly. You're using the correct chart types for whatever instance you're looking at. You want people to open this chart and instantly know something that they need to actually work on or absorb, just so they know the information that you're trying to give them. Also, when you're making a dashboard, what kind of dashboard is this? Is this a operational dashboard that they need to know? They just open for 10 seconds, see if there's any issues, and move on. Or is it a day-to-day dashboard that helps managers identify how's their team doing? What trends do we need to keep an eye out for? Is there anything we need to talk about? So in order to kind of capitalize on design, some factors to consider are effectiveness over beauty. So if you look up people like Stephen Few or Edward Tufte, they'll really kind of stress not to use too much flowery graphics when it comes to designing charts and dashboards. And that's because the more you clutter it with colors or chart lines or a bunch of data labels or all that kind of stuff, it really becomes confusing, and you can't grab the instant message out of the chart right away. Dashboards should be able to tell critical information instantly, not just dashboards, but for charts and tables and all that kind of stuff instantly. So I use this dashboard here as an example. You want to use top to left, bottom to right, because the human eye is always going to instantly go to the top left, and then make its way across right, down, and then again to the right. So you always want to have the most important information here in the top left. You want to make sure that you know where you're putting your data and what the most critical information is in the order you're placing it in around. Now, I think this one's nice because it shows you, for a salesperson, how much they've won in terms of deals. This is the most important number to them. Around it is some context, and then some additional charts to kind of that are kind of secondary or tertiary factors that they want to think about and consider. Now you'll notice, for instance, some of these charts, they don't have chart lines because chart lines don't really help you too much. When you have a chart, you want to show a difference. You want to show a comparison. Whether the actual numbers, you can drill into that report and find out what they are, but usually when you're looking at a visualization, you need to know something right away, and numbers are not exactly going to be the tell-all for you. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, just got to use color sparingly and effectively. So if you see the reds and blues in these bottom two charts, in your brain you just instantly associate them together. The blue in this top chart is associated with that blue in the bottom chart. They're the same. So when you're making different reports and different visualizations, you need to keep in mind that you want to effectively coordinate them together. And this all may seem pretty basic and common sense, but sometimes I just like to bring it up. Also, red is the first thing you're going to look at. Red is bad. Any questions on design? All right, cool. Breezing through this. So communication's the third one, and this is going to be the most important and the most ambiguous one of all the topics I have here. Now, this is because I think that you should think of data as like a language. Data is that language that all of your stakeholders kind of took like in Spanish in middle school. They kind of know it, but it's not enough to really use it correctly, and they may use it incorrectly or make it misleading. Data is powerful, so if you use it incorrectly, you could pretty much change any data set to tell you exactly what you want it to say. So that's why it's important to have integrity and to know exactly what you're doing when you're working with data. And that's kind of why data analytics has a big job in the market, because people need translators to kind of sift through these large sets and explain to them what's going on. So think of yourself as more of a translator. You're taking this large set of data. It could be about anything. You need to translate that into a sentence, a paragraph, or one number, just so everyone else understands what's going on. So things to consider about that is, what's the most effective mediums of communications? Excuse me. When you are working with specific people, they're going to have specific ways that really resonate with them to help them understand data quickly. So for some people, I can send them an email and they'll completely understand what I'm talking about. Some people require the visual learning, and some people, they just won't get it unless you come up to them and speak to them directly. And I'll talk about a little bit more in the next slide, but kind of identifying the different kinds of people and giving them the different kinds of information that they require is going to be kind of what sets you apart as a data analyst. Also, a big thing I want to talk about is scoping requests. Now, scoping requests are going to come at you a lot. People, when you become a data analyst, you're going to become very popular because all of a sudden everyone wants to know. They've got all these questions and all these theories about what's going on in their company, but they can't really say for sure unless they have some numbers to back it up. So all of a sudden, everyone's going to ask you questions. Everyone's going to want to know, what can we do about this? How is this trending? Can I see the customers who have said this about us, right? So translating kind of goes both ways in that regard, because not only are you translating the data for them, in a way you also need to translate what they're asking you into the data. Now, if that doesn't make any sense, it's kind of, that's fair. It's more so that they're going to ask you for something, and then you need to translate what they're actually asking for, because they can use all kinds of language that kind of fits in their business, or kind of translates whatever's been asked of them from higher up. But you need to find out what they're really asking for and how you can kind of make that work in the data. So if they're asking you, for instance, how are we doing? It's a very, very basic question. You need to kind of drill down into that, saying, Okay, what specific metric are you talking about? What are your ways of defining success? What are your ways of defining us doing bad, poorly? So scoping your request becomes very important, because otherwise you're going to have to keep going back to your desk, start working on it, then kind of go back to them and ask them more questions. A good data analyst will be able to kind of get a good idea of exactly what they're asking for and kind of get all the questions through right at the very beginning in order to figure out what they want. A good practice for this, I would say, are just kind of the case studies. Just like how, if you're ever given a case study, you never give an answer without asking a question. It's the same situation like this. You always want to ask questions back to them. You want to know what they're really asking for. You want to define it. You want to drill down. You need to set those expectations right off the bat. Because there's nothing going to be worse than starting to work on something, spinning your wheels, and then kind of realizing you're delivering something completely different than what they had in mind. So that's going to be a big thing. And the last thing is just going to be being able to give recommendations. You're going to be the expert in this domain, in this field, and with this data. So if there are issues with the data, like it only covers 80% of the whole sample, or maybe maybe there's just a lot missing, for instance. These are things you need to be able to communicate back with them. You need to kind of account for that. They're going to have an idea of what they want from the data from you, but being able to push back and say, this is what the data is actually telling you. You can't just focus on this one focal point of the data. You need to consider the whole picture. It's one of the hardest parts for me specifically, because I like to just give back to what I'm asked. But being able to give recommendations, being able to kind of influence the decision, that's going to be pretty big. So this all comes down to what I was saying, know your audience. What kind of person are you delivering this for? Now I have these 4 blocks here because at my company we kind of have kind of one of those personality test things where based on your personality, you're an analytical type, so you're blue on top, or you like quick results, so you're red on top, or maybe you resonate better with verbal and teamwork, then that's more of a green thing, right? Whatever system you have, you need to find a way to kind of look into who is asking the results and kind of what kind of personality and what's the best way to get to them. Because if they're a blue person, for instance, they're an analytical type. They're somebody who likes looking into the raw details. They want to double check your work, essentially. In that case, I'm more likely to write out a long email. Here's all the details. Here are all the things I've checked. Here's the raw data to go along with it. If you have any other questions, I'm available for that. Versus, I have some people, if I report to a VP or to someone in the C-suite, chances are they don't want to see any of that. They want a five-word email or sentence saying, this is exactly what I'm looking for. They don't want any of the details. They don't care about that. They trust you to kind of get that down. So knowing your audience is going to help you prepare what kind of results you're going to give them. Do you give them a chart? Do you give them an email? Do you give them a lengthy explanation? That's going to depend on your audience. So that's going to be a skill that you really develop as you work with the people. But it's something that if you bring up in your interview that you're considering the audience, you're considering who you're working for, then that's going to be pretty big, because everyone's going to be different. And everyone's going to have different results they're expecting from you. So something else on that is I have outcomes and metrics over systems. And so this one's kind of unfortunate if you're like a real big passion about data, because for some people, they don't really care about the kind of wizardry or the kind of work that you've done to get this metric or get this chart. Some people, they just want the results. So if you're working with other data people, maybe they care more about that. But sometimes if you focus too much on how you get that, here's the system, here's the algorithm I use, here are the formulas and whatnot, it's going to get kind of bogged down, it's going to get confusing and cluttered. So again, it comes back to knowing your audience, but for the most part, it's better to focus on the outcomes and the actual metrics themselves over how you did it. If they're curious, they'll ask you about that. So kind of more of a follow-up. Something else that I think is pretty big is really considering the other domains in your company or just in general. I think there are a lot of other factors that personally I have not considered when I'm doing a request. So if I'm pulling some information on our support metrics, like what's our case volume looking like how many support cases are they writing to us? If I'm seeing an uptick in case volumes, I could either think that maybe we're just getting more popular, maybe our same customers are having more issues with us. The kind of domains that are going to help you out with this is knowing, well, product just rolled out a new update, so maybe that could be the reason why. Here's the date, here's how the lines up with the trends. Maybe sales had a really good month, so we've got a whole bunch of new customers. So it's always important to consider other domains. It's really easy to kind of get stuck in these are my objects, this is my data. I feel like I have an expertise on it, but really everything's connected. So in your whole company and in it's just like stocks, for example, you can't just consider one thing. It could be a lot of different things. So the more domain and the more knowledge you have of what surrounds this report or metric that you're working on, the better off you're going to be for speaking to it and kind of explaining any kind of outcome that happens from it. And that last bullet is exactly why I'm here right now. Presentation skills. It's something that I'm very much working on, but you're going to have to present a lot. This could be just to your manager, this could be to your manager's manager, this could be to the board of directors, this could be to anybody. But you're going to need to, again, translate your data and be able to answer questions from whatever angle or whoever is kind of asking. And that's going to really come from having proper preparation, knowing exactly what you're delivering, and really spending that time and going the extra step for whatever you're delivering. Cool. All right, so the last one is kind of more of a personal thing in terms of workload balance. So this one's especially important to me just because, as I mentioned before, for a while I was trying to prove myself in the company, so I kind of became a little bit of a yes man. I was happy to do extra work. I was happy to provide results anyone was asking for, but I was always finding that important skill to be able to capture is how do you say no. For a lot of interviews during my 7-8 month job hunts, I got turned down because I did not know how to say it. Because I was more about, I should go the extra distance, or we can fit it in somewhere, or we'll make it work. I don't really know how to say no. But it's going to be really big because sometimes you're going to be duplicating your own results. You're going to be giving people coinciding information. Sometimes they don't need to know that information. Sometimes it's just not important enough at the time. And being able to kind of push back is going to be good for yourself because you're going to be able to keep your own workload at a reasonable level and be able to dive in deep enough to the current workload you have and answer correctly. And it just prevents you from getting burnt out. Because if you get burnt out, your work quality suffers, and then it's just an all-around bad time. On top of that, things like when do you ask for help? A big thing you're going to hear, it's a big buzzword, is automation. They're going to ask you what kind of process improvements or automation you have in mind. How are you going to make these tasks that you do every month, every week, every quarter go by faster? Chances are, as an analyst, you're going to be creating monthly reports or weekly reports, things that they're going to see on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. So what kind of things are you thinking about in terms of your scripting languages, your formulas? What are you doing to make this go faster? How are you doing this? How are you getting yourself out of your own job, pretty much? Because the more you free yourself up out of these tasks, the more fun you get to have, because then you get to explore, you get to make some more models and that kind of thing. So I consider that pretty important. Kind of ties in with the how do you say no, but how are you evaluating tasks and requests? What's in your priority list? How are you allocating your time to that? You're really going to have a lot of things coming at you from a lot of different directions, so correctly balancing that is going to be big. Because your team could be just you. It could be 5 people, it could be 20 people. Regardless of the load, you're going to have just all kinds of projects or requests kind of floating around. So being able to prioritize them correctly and get them out to the right people at the right time is going to be pretty big. And so the big thing that I have to help me balance that is the urgency versus priority factor. And I kind of have this nice little graphic here on the right to help me prioritize. So for everything you get, always keep in mind what's important and what's urgent, and what's important and urgent. And then you need to kind of balance those correctly, because those are going to be the ones that they're going to care the most about. It also depends on who's asking for you. You know, if it's for me, if my manager's asking me for something versus if my CCO is asking me for something, it's going to be very different in terms of priority. So just keep in mind that this is a good way to balance your workload, to identify which tasks to get through first, because you could have like 10 to 20 tasks kind of floating around that you need to bust out, whether they're fast or slow. You just let's see here. Something else here is when you send things out, just consider when people might follow up or have additional questions. So for me personally, I know I'll push some things out, and I'll be happy to take some more things on. But then those things I just pushed out will come back to me with more questions, or actually we need to see this in a bigger date range, or maybe can we see this, but can we get rid of this? So all of a sudden now I've kind of overloaded myself because I've taken on new requests while also having my old requests come back. It's a little hard to predict, but I think it's always good to leave yourself a little bit of room to wiggle with, because you never know if they're going to have more questions. It's also helpful if you follow up with them, take the initiative. Ask them, did you get everything you need from this? Have you had a chance to take a look at this? Because sometimes it'll be a weekend and they won't have looked at it at all. So kind of staying on top of the ball, following up with them, it's gonna really help. Documentation, it's the least fun part about the job, but it's going to be one of the best parts, because it's going to help you remind yourself. Because for me personally, I've got tasks I do on a yearly basis. And with the amount of things that are flying by, I do not remember what I did a year ago. So I'll get a report back, and they'll ask me to recreate it, and I'll have no idea what I did. So writing documentation is going to be a helpful reminder for yourself. It's also going to be helpful if you want to pawn it off on somebody else. Because a lot of this is going to be, what can I, again, automate myself out of, or assign to somebody else to kind of take care of. If you write proper documentation with styling, with good detailed instructions, then you can easily ask somebody else to help you out with this. And then again, when it comes to workload balance, you got to always make time for yourself, just so you can keep learning. It's really important, because I'm sure you all know in tech, it's constantly evolving. There's always new tools, new things to learn, and things you haven't considered. I'm by no means a master in any of the domains that I'm currently working in. So making time for yourself is going to help you get better at your job. You're going to have time to research some new formulas, some new tools, any kind of thing like that. So your manager is pretty much always going to be okay with you spending some time to improve processes. So keep yourself learning, and that's going to be really big. So that's kind of all I had for now. I've got my email here for any questions, and I'm also happy to talk to you people afterwards. But are there any questions on anything I kind of went over, or anything else kind of around the domain I'm happy to speak about that I didn't cover? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, what kind of technologies do you use as a data analyst? Like, what are some of the top ones that are out there in the market?
So the number one is going to be SQL. It's the most common one. I also find it's the most transferable one, because I came into the job hunt with SQL and R specifically, and my company ended up having me transfer that to Salesforce and Excel. I still use SQL and R, but having the kind of skills, it's easy to move into something else. So usually the building blocks are going to be some sort of database language, so that whether that be SQL, whether that be NoSQL or Excel or Access or anything like that. A data visualization tool is going to be good. So that's going to either be like just as basic as Excel, but all the way up to like Tableau, Power BI, Salesforce, and then a nice to have on top of that would be a scripting language, so like Python, R, MATLAB.
Okay.
I would focus on the first two though.
What about like frameworks?
Frameworks? To be honest, I don't really have too much experience with that. I mostly work in a reporting kind of aspect and a little bit of modeling. I don't really work too much in frameworks. Yeah.
So like what is your company like? What type of data are you analyzing?
It's a good question. So the nice thing about being a data analyst is that kind of my day-to-day is always different. Commonly, I will work on, for our support teams, we commonly work out of cases. So these are support cases that customers are opening up with us to ask us a question or issues that are going on. So what I will do, whether it's for support or implementation, I will help them with their performance metrics. I'll let them know how they're doing in terms of how quick are they to respond to these cases, how happy are the customers after these cases. What are we doing for commissions? It helps us kind of identify who is doing well and how can we kind of translate that to everybody else. On top of that, I help them with all kinds of odd jobs. I help them with understanding their budgeting. How do we forecast how many more people we're going to need next year? So we take a look at the workload, take a look at the trending amount of new customers. We look at all those kinds of things. So it really focuses more on support metrics, so we're on cases, our milestones and projects, which are what we specifically use to implement a new product to a customer, and then just kind of the overall performance of those people. But my specific job kind of also bleeds into finance. We pull a lot of financial data, we pull sales data. Really, the world's my oyster. I can kind of go into any of the fields of my company to kind of pull from.
So you're using data from all aspects of the company to help improve the processes of the company.
Yeah, I think it's important to consider. So when it comes to, for instance, like the budgeting I mentioned earlier, we want to know how many more support technicians we're going to need, or how many more implementation managers we're going to need. So we take sales data to understand what's our volume looking like. Are we selling more this year? Where are our usual spikes? Where are we going to need help the most? Specifically, which products? What kind of training do we need to do to kind of translate that to our teams? But this also translates to product as well. How are our products performing? Are there issues with the product that are kind of translating to the support? It's all really kind of connected in a way. So.
Okay. So you're receiving like kind of complaints from the customers sometimes, or tickets. You guys ever like proactively send out like surveys or something to be like, what would you guys like to see more, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we got a few things for that. So our customer success program is the more proactive to this customer support's reactive. So we kind of have assigned customers that we consider are high importance. So we assign a manager to kind of reach out to them, ask them for their specific feedback. What do you want from us? What can we do to kind of make this experience go better? Kind of be that one person to handle all of their requests and potential issues they may have. On top of that, we also have surveys we send out to all of our customers on a 6-month basis. So these are like NPS surveys or CES surveys. So these are going to be surveys that are going to ask, would you recommend our company to a colleague? And using those metrics, we're going to get an idea of what our company's overall perception is to our customers, which customers are kind of not so happy with us, and how we can improve on that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I just have one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you ever think that like while you're automating your processes and algorithms with Python, and do you ever think that someday you might have like develop the algorithms for every aspect of data analysis so well that like the company wouldn't even need you anymore? It's just like, you have all your logic and algorithms.
That's the dream. Automating yourself out of a job is the dream. But the nice thing about that is because companies are constantly evolving, so the algorithms are always going to need a tweak. So for instance, my company is going to implement a new product, or in my case, we've acquired a new company, or maybe we've decided to track a metric differently. Now, if they fired me, they're not going to know exactly how to go into these algorithms and fix them, and they're not exactly trained on that, right? So there's always that issue with automation that people are afraid of. It's going to kind of get yourself out of a job. But I feel like in reality, especially at the current state, they're going to need someone to maintain that. in the same instance, if we had self-flying planes, we'd still probably want a pilot in there just to make sure that things are going all right. So our jobs become less of actual reporting itself, and more of the maintaining, more of the fine-tuning, and adjusting for the dirty data, because that's going to be a constant.
Do you think that will require less data analysts on the job, like instead of I don't know how big your team is, but instead of 10 people, maybe just 2 people do that?
No, I think that's a very valid concern. I don't think so personally. Just because of the nature of how slow most industries are. I think people are always going to need data analysts to translate their data, because the nice thing about this field is it really applies to anybody. You can help anybody from Google to like a meat market. Right? A meat market's still going to have data in terms of their receipts, times of when people are buying things. You can always help them out with this sort of thing. Being able to automate yourself out of a job in every single one of these companies is going to be very tough, because the quantity of data that we're receiving as a whole is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Because we're getting better at pulling more data, and it's just getting more and more confusing. So I think it's a very valid concern, but I don't feel like that's going to be anything to worry about in a while. If anything, I feel like the field's getting bigger. Yeah. Yeah.
So can you talk about the types of analysis you're doing? Are you doing sort of classical statistical analysis? Are you using machine learning to infer things from the data? And I guess it's sort of the tool. Are you doing this all in Excel?
That's a great question. So I personally have a lot of passion, and I'd love to move more towards data science and do more machine learning. It's not something that I'm currently doing a lot in my job. So most of our analysis kind of just comes from statistical. So we do a lot of regression, and we'll, I guess that is machine learning in a way, but it's something like fancier models like that, right? But I feel like right now for reporting, it mostly comes down to just having a foundation of statistics, knowing the laws of law of big data, and understanding the difference between correlation and causation, that kind of stuff. It's really gonna help you guide there. We're eventually hoping to work our way towards having models and that kind of stuff, but most of our things are just kind of pretty simple predictability based on budget and targets. Yeah. Yeah.
So for somebody who's on the outside of the industry and is looking to get in, like what would you say are like the most important skills and qualifications, education, that sort of thing to have if you're looking to actually get into the business? Is it convincing somebody to actually hire you to do the job in the first place?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. I came from economics, but I was also in a similar boat in terms of I needed to find a way to convince them to let me in. So I think having experience with dirty data is going to be a really big one. That was always a big thing to help me out. So I took a Coursera course on specifically the one on getting and cleaning data. I think what also helped me out a lot was I actually spent a while collecting my own data. So I would record and I would process based off what I was seeing in an esports game, for instance. So I started making my own database, and then I kind of realized all the issues that I had with that. I was typing too fast, so I put like 400 instead of 40. Or I kind of run into those errors. It's kind of getting yourself familiar and showing that you've kind of put in that work to have data. It's going to be really helpful, because there's no substitute for just having experience of knowing what you're doing, knowing how you filter, how you sort, and whether that's just in Excel or whether that's in SQL, it's going to be really helpful. And then I think being able to talk about all those skills and these soft skills, like being able to talk about you, because you are an expert. That's the thing you need to tell them. You can't kind of come into it saying that like, oh, I think I know this. You do know it. So just kind of having that confidence and knowing exactly where your strong suits are. That's going to help you out a lot. So I think the big things are going to be, as I mentioned before, having some sort of experience with databases, visualizations, like knowing when to use a bar chart versus a line chart, being able to make those in the first place, and being able to talk about it. Those are going to be, I think, the big three that gets you into most entry level jobs. Does that help?
Okay. Thank you.
Hey.
My first degree also is in economics.
Hey.
I had trouble finding a work here. So since I graduated long ago, and I came here and studying software engineering. And my question is, what types of jobs, like being a data analyst, can you find like having economics background, like software?
So I think the best part about having an economics degree, it's kind of key to everything. I find that no one's really upset if you have an economics degree. In most jobs I applied for, they'd be like, oh, we want business, we want accounting, we'll take economics. And like, same thing with anything that's a mathematical degree. It kind of fits in a nice centerpiece. So I think what's really nice about having an economics degree is being able to talk about your courses or maybe your experience in econometrics, because that's going to be the most transferable skill between economics and statistics / data analytics. So just being able to talk about you've worked in data, you know what trends look like, you know how to kind of query that data. That's going to be pretty big. So what specifically do you think? What specific you're asking like specific jobs you're looking for?
No, just like position data analyst or like, I'm just like choosing where to go, like more to the side of web development or maybe data analyst. Like what else can be done?
Well, there's
Financial analyst, the same.
yeah. So I'm a data analyst, but when I was job hunting, I just looked up for analyst because you're applying the same skill set to kind of a bunch of different domains. So I mean, for instance, I work upstairs with the sales analysts, with the financial analysts, the HR analysts. You're kind of you have the same idea. You're using your thoughts and statistics. You're going into the data, but whether the data is sales or finance or services, it's got to have the same mindset. You got to have the same ability to query the data to pull it out. So really, any of the analyst fields, they're going to be about the same. They may ask you to use different skills or different languages, but that's just going to kind of transcend all of them. You really won't know until you kind of go into the job description and then see that whether they actually know what they're talking about or not. Because some people ask for an analyst and have no idea what that is. Yeah. Yeah.
How much time do you spend building out new models for like metrics that they want to implement versus maintaining older metrics?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. Unfortunately, you'll find that the models themselves are they're what I call the fun part. Most of the job is specifically data cleaning, understanding your data, knowing how to account for the data, and really knowing how to overcome the deficiencies or the potential issues that kind of come up from it. Because scaling that is going to be the big thing. Because once you have a solid data set, building models or exploring or doing all that kind of stuff, that's pretty quick. It's pretty fun. You don't have to do a whole lot for that. Anyone can go to Python and download the package, right? So it's really going to come down to how well you understand the data, and what can you pull out of that. So I would say, of my time, I would spend about 15 to 20% of my time just kind of coming up with new models or thinking of new solutions, right? And this could be either whether they ask me to or whether I just want to do it for fun. And the other part of the time will be kind of more those reoccurring tasks, those maintaining, which is why I think it's so important to try and automate yourself out of those. That way you operate yourself with more freedom to make models, to go exploring into the data sets and kind of pull information that they didn't even know was there, right? So you get a lot of freedom as a data analyst because they don't know what's in there. It's up for you to find out. So does that help?
Yeah.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said you were into esports and like you started keeping track of that data. What sort of data were you tracking?
How familiar are you with League of Legends?
Dota 2.
Okay. So they had implemented a new objective into the game, and so what I was doing was I was manually going through the VODs, and I was pulling out specifically at what time are they pulling these dragons out, or what time they complete the objectives, who gets them, does that influence the result at all? Is this a effect of just teams get them because they're already snowballing, or they're snowballing because they get them.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like I had a personal passion in watching this type, so like I might as well collect something while I'm doing it, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's always a great place to start if you're looking to get into data. It's just find something you already like, because there's going to be data in it already. So a really popular fun one is sabermetrics. That's going to be baseball data. There's huge databases out there already, and there's a lot of courses that can teach you how to go operate your way through them. But if there's already a field you like, it's never too late to start collecting data on it.
What did you find out from that data you collected?
I am really bad at data entry. I made a lot of mistakes. I tried to submit it to a few places, but they would find a lot of errors in that. So this is like me just getting started. We've learned a lot of lessons from that. But I did find out it tended to be more of a teams who were already doing well, so it just happened to be something that they collected to help them move along a little faster.
Yeah.
There wasn't. I tried to find differences in the types, and there were certain types that were more focused on, and the people who focused on specific types tended to do better.
Okay.
So I'm trying to keep it broad because I
Yeah.
try not to geek out about a specific video game here.
It's all about the last hits, man.
Yeah. Any other questions? Well, I really appreciate you all coming out to this. I'm still pretty new to giving these tech talks, so any feedback you have in terms of presentation or content, I'd love to hear it. My email's right here. I'm happy to send out this deck. I'm happy to answer any of the questions that may come up as you kind of go on day to day, or any kind of specific help you have when looking for jobs or getting into data analytics. I got a lot of help getting in here as well, so I just want to be able to pass it on, and if there's anything I can potentially help out with, let me know.
Great. Thanks, Yuchin.
All right. Have a great weekend, guys. Get some pizza. Oh, sorry. Blocking the screen there. If you have any questions about our boot camp, I know there's a couple non-students here. Feel free to talk to me or Rick, and we can even give you a tour of our school if you're interested. Yeah, thanks for coming out, guys. I'll see you around.